go. Okay. Just in time. People were witnessing my Windows update that just finished. I'm from D2L, Desire to Learn. As people may think of it from like a year ago before we rebranded into something nice and short. I'm here. I was supposed to be presenting with a colleague from BCIT. He couldn't make. I should stand up closer to the mic because I promised I'd speak into the mic for the recording. My colleague from BCIT could make it to LAK, so BCIT, British Columbia Institute of Technology. You may have seen the signs across the street. They have one here and one out in Burnaby, which is outskirts of Vancouver. So my name is Stephen Michaud. I'm a senior technical product manager for adaptive and CBE, or competency-based education. I've been working in e-learning for 13 years now. If you name a major LMS, I've worked on it at some point in time. E-learning is in my blood, but I am not an academic. I'm an engineer, practitioner, maybe overly pragmatic at times, so bear with my answers to the deep questions. Lawrence, who couldn't make it today, he's an instructor in their Automotives program. So they have 2 tracks. They have an intense 10-week track that gets students prepared for certification exams. And that's the course that he was looking at introducing adaptive learning into and what the pilot is for this presentation. So this is going to describe what happened in this presentation. The pilot was both successful and with a lot of learnings. So I would say was not smooth, but what it does do is it exemplifies some of the problems that exists with adaptive learning and adaptive learning software as it stands today in the industry. So, show of hands, who knows what adaptive learning is? Okay, good. So I'll actually tell you what it is, and it'll extend my presentation a little bit. Adaptive learning is a methodology, usually with software, that allows the delivery of learning activities to be adjusted based on the student's progress towards a learning objective. So as the system or individual, adaptive learning doesn't have to be automatic. As they progress through their learning plan, that plan adjusts depending on what their outcomes have been, their demonstrated mastery of learning objectives, or even if you start to make changes to the program that they're in. So what we have built at D2L is a product called LEAP. I'll go back to the course in a minute. A product called LEAP, which uses reinforcement learning, some semantic analysis algorithms, as well as some heuristics to build out this learning path for students based on the learning activities, outcomes, and questions that the instructor or the course designer has put in place for that course or for that module or for that little snippet of time where they want to have them learn. So the course, that was LEAP. The course, like I said, is a refresher course, runs over 10 weeks. It is driving towards a very specific goal. That goal is to pass an exam. These students are usually have already done apprenticeships. They've been working in the field of automotive repair for a while, and they have taken as short a time possible as they can to drive towards this exam. So these are self-selected, motivated learners, right? They are usually on their own money, on their own time, and they are driving for this exam. It's very high stakes for them. So in terms of adaptive learning and the software in general, this is a pre-selected group of people that are going to do well with this kind of tool. Adaptive learning is very directed at the individual student. The student will get as much out of it as they want to put into it for these type of tools. And they're best used in sort of either a remediation or a bootstrapping setting where you want to give the students a heads up or a chance to catch up on their own as they're going in. In my experience, these tools are not meant to be as a replacement for direct instruction or for a well-designed lecture or class. They're a supplement because they'll only get you so far up the understanding scale of things. The pilot had 53 students running through it. They involved 3 textbooks, question banks of approximately 10,000 multiple choice questions, and 23 modules with about 10 learning objectives in each module. So it was very broad, very structured course to get through. So initial implementation. So at D2L, we have our implementation specialists. They'll come in, they'll teach the person about the software, how it works. They'll make sure that you have the 3 things that LEAP requires: content, questions, and learning outcomes. They'll do the mechanics of deploying LEAP. LEAP is an LTI tool, learning tool interoperability. It's an IMS standard for third-party tools being integrated with LMSs. And soon after the implementation was completed, it was obvious that for BCIT to succeed, they needed more. So just training and a little hands-on was not enough. When trying to build a rich adaptive learning solution, there are common roadblocks that are hit, and this BCIT implementation, they hit them all. The number of questions in the question library were unmanageable for LEAP as a third-party tool. The tool itself will only be as organized as the questions in the LMS to begin with. And the question banks from the publishers left a little bit to be desired in their titling of questions and organizational flow when they came into the LMS. So in the root of the question library was these 10,000 questions in a rough order of how it went through the textbook. Main sources of content, so the EPUB books, versions of the textbooks were behind a paywall, where individual students will have individual codes. It's pretty standard for ebooks and rich media these days, but it made for some challenges for a third-party LTI tool to be able to access this content, to be able to present it in a different order than the textbook intended. So one of the things there, we were able to work with the publisher for the pilot purposes to get the EPUB and convert it into HTML documents for all the different chapters and sections, and then be able to host that on D2L servers to be able to then present the appropriate chapters or sections that the student needed to view at the time that they needed to view it, as opposed to them reading through the entire textbook in a prescribed order. This was one of our largest implementations of LEAP to date, and that had its own challenges. Like I said, we had never dealt with 10,000 questions at once, with 2 textbooks broken down by module, by section and chapter. we were looking at, again, with thousands of content items. The system was able to deal with that amount of content and be able to make strong recommendations. What it was lacking in some was in how we were able to present that information and control back to the instructor. Within LEAP, though it is a recommendation engine, and if you trust it, you can let it go, and it'll make all the recommendations on what the learning path for a student should be for a particular set of learning outcomes. There are controls built in to LEAP that allow the instructor to validate those assumptions and those recommendations and make adjustments as they see fit. And these adjustment tools were not ready for that much content. I think we had an embarrassment of riches. Went the wrong way. There we go. So this required us to re-engage. So now not only was implementation specialist brought in, I was brought in as one of the inventors of LEAP and the engine. Yeah, Sean, you can smile. And what we needed to do was do a better job of organizing before we got started. We went through, we've properly titled all the questions, involved some very handy-dandy script work from some of our customization team to go through and put the ISBN number, chapter, and section for all the textbooks as a title for all the questions. This helped organize them a lot better. We went further along with Nelson and Pearson on the route towards getting easier system-to-system access to the content. That conversation is a long one with a publisher, so we're still in those discussions. So we did continue on with the pilot being a broken down section of those textbooks. But we do need to find a longer term solution. Likely it'll be building in the ability for an LTI tool to launch another LTI tool to be able to access the content, which is my problem, not the customer's problem, not your problem. But that's the one of the bigger hurdles with adaptive learning is access to content. Most of the adaptive learning tools, LEAP, I've heard of Newton, the Smart Sparrow, Realize It. There's a number of tools out there today. Depend on there being open access to content. And they were developed in a time when the OER was on the rise, the Open Educational Resources and Repositories. That dream of having truly open repositories hasn't really solidified yet. Every school has their own, and usually they put it behind their own kind of access and paywall for various reasons. I know that UC Berkeley has had a problem with some of its open content where it's actually pulled a lot of it recently due to accessibility issues. So open content, that dream has not gotten there yet. So that's a place of consternation and work for adaptive learning tools. Like I said, we had to do a lot of rework on LEAP flows and the adjustment workflows within LEAP. So we were able to make some changes for that client and bring that back into the product for everyone. And 10,000 questions is awesome. That's having that many questions in the question bank is great. I don't see that as being the average in anybody's course. Does anybody have 10,000 questions in the online ready for pulling together in quizzes? Yeah, no. So our lessons learned. we need better organizational tools within LEAP to provide for easier manipulation of content. And also the LMSs need to provide better tools to organize and manipulate content and questions. We're into the digital age, and there is more and more and more content available for our instructors, our course designers, and we don't want people to have to keep spreadsheets or OneNote documents or things to say with just a ton of links on where the content is and where the students should go looking for stuff. So one of the things LEAP uses is a set of semantic algorithms to avoid a training cycle. So our adaptive learning product uses some machine intelligence and machine learning to be able to provide recommendations, but it needs to start with something. We can't be randomly handing out recommendations to students. The first 10 students, sorry, you're helping the next 10. So we're using some semantic algorithms to find out the most relevant documents from that pool of documents to be able to teach a particular learning outcome. And they're good at a first pass. They do an okay job. But we need to provide the tools to the instructors to say, yes, those are good ones, but you missed my favorite. And that needs to be upfront. And you missed it because it's a picture, not a text document, and your semantic algorithms can't figure it out. Without good naming conventions, an organization, it's hard for those manual adjustments to happen. So just setting up some best practices for our instructors, for the industry in general, for organizing question banks and content banks and course packages. That's something that we really need to drive and need to do. So that's involvement with the IMS group that we'll need to do. And instructional management systems, I think it was. You cannot find on the IMS site what IMS stands for. You remember?
IMS used to be something about instructional management systems. It was started by 4 R1 schools in the US. And once it became an international standards organization, they decided to change their name to just IMS to stand for IMS.
Yes. Thank you, Sean. Sean is one of our IMS champions, so that's why I look to him on that. Talk some about the organization input, and then when we're giving this new tool, this new powerful tool to instructors, we need somebody there that can teach them the basics of what the tool is and what it can do and what it can't do. Like I said, when I talked to the audience here, not many people had learned about adaptive learning, and that's to be expected. It's a new technology. That's a new technology, a new way of thinking about delivering education. It shouldn't fall on the individual to figure it out for themselves, how it should be applied and how it can be applied. So we have come up with, and we will be giving better training on what it means to build an adaptive learning path. So outcomes, I said, I wish I had Lawrence here, but I can talk to some about what came out. The qualitative feedback, so just talking with people, doing surveys, came back great. They loved it. We were able to get the students through the course in the prescribed time, which is a challenge itself in a 10-week course doing a module before exam preparation. The exam is externally administered, so we rely on self-reporting back on results. So 16 students that came back and told Lawrence how they had done. 15 had passed. Normal pass rate was around 75% in the course. I know that's very loosey-goosey right now, but one of the things that we're in the process of doing is putting together a grant proposal, some research proposals, to be able to run some comparative studies, because this is the perfect course to be able to do studies with, as it runs in a very fast cycle. 10 weeks, 50 students at least through every cycle. It's ideal for doing a kind of A-B comparison test study. Quick look at the future of adaptive learning. It's very small here. Adaptive learning is right here in the Gartner hype cycle, which is called the trough of despair. Technologies peak up in the hype. So everybody's excited, awesome, right where learning analytics is and has been for the last 5 years. But as the technology matures, people go, okay, I tried using it, and these are the problems. The electric car, where's my charger? Why can't I make it out of the city? And right now, that's where adaptive learning tools are. The first generation of tools are out there, they're being used, and it's now time to reflect and build the tools that the educators need, not that the engineers thought was cool. That was it. I've hit my time. If you have any questions, I'm open for questions, and you know where to find me.
So we have enough time for questions.
I am a practitioner, and I have a question about when new textbook editions come out, or if the national exam changes, or if test question changes. How does a faculty member, with the incredible time investment it took to develop this one course, how does an instructor layer in those new resources and knowledge and clean out the old from their course?
Well, it's a good question, and it's one of the things that a product like LEAP can help do better. Once you've learned how to set the content up for LEAP and questions up for LEAP, adding new content and questions is just incremental work and can be just done. Once the content and questions appear in the learning management system or are deleted from the learning management system, LEAP as the LTI tool will detect that that's happened and will stop recommending content that's not there anymore, reevaluate new content, and through some discovery algorithms that we have in place as part of the recommendation heuristics, will not just discount new items because the old works better than the new. It'll still recommend some new items to bubble it up and see if it'll improve the student's experience.
In the broader literature, is there sort of a benchmark for impact that you expect adaptive learning to have when applied to a course?
So there's not a lot of literature on adaptive learning impact. We have our own NSERC study that we did in 2015 with Dragan Gusevich. We saw about 20 to 30% grade increase, achievement increase, and we saw about a 10-15% reduction in time spent to get there. We are in the process of doing a follow-up study on that before publishing everything. It was a relatively small study to begin with, so we needed to just get some more validation of our methodology in place. But really, the efficacy of adaptive learning comes into how it's applied. Really, it's a tool, not a replacement. So it can be deceptive in how effective it is, especially if you're using it, say, as a test prep. So you put an adaptive learning path in just before the midterm exam, You put anything focused in just before a midterm exam, you're going to get improved grades. So it's going to be interesting how we devise the study properly to tease that out. I believe you were up next.
I would like to ask you, I assume that in your context, a significant part of knowledge is passive knowledge, knowledge in action. Can you somehow, say?
So one of the we'll see if I catch the answer right. One of the limitations with our adaptive learning tool, most adaptive learning tools as exist today, is they don't test that far up the Bloom's taxonomy scale, right? You get basic understanding, a little bit of testing for comprehension, but you don't get up into that true, do they have insight? Do they have true mastery of that learning outcome or not?
You know, it's associated, take example, serving clinics. You can read as many books as you wish from McEnroe or whoever, but unless you do it, unless you have it in your hand, you don't know it. You know, the same as medicine, so it's very riding the bicycle. I think
Yep.
in your case, this must be part of the what you try to test.
That's correct. It deals best with fact-based learning, right? And it's mainly going to be hopefully a time saver that helps to allow that time for practice, interaction, as talked this morning. If we can relieve some of the burden of the factual learning in a course and leave more time for discourse and discussion, better things will happen. Yeah. How are we doing?
Yep. Yeah. Very good. So thanks.
Thank you.